I'll say language is important. We never used the word boycott. That was kind of used by other people. I don't think you can boycott a voluntary program. So when it comes to how successful it is, I think anytime as a union you educate your membership on what their rights are under the CBA, whether that's a win or whatever, I think that's positive. And then when you have, I think, over 2/3 of teams negotiate with their players for better language and better rules and better working conditions than what's in the CBA, I think that's extremely positive. I think that's a win. Our goal and our hope is to make the offseason better. We know that the vast majority of players realize and understand that the offseason is kind of an archaic model and it's not in the best interest of health and safety of the players. And I think you see that when these teams agreed to walkthroughs only, sandals for walkthroughs, no helmets, no competitive periods, less time on the field, no meetings, less weeks, canceled mini camps. Those are all positive things for players. So I would say that's a win. And then the fact that over 2/3 of coaches kind of agreed that the normal offseason program wasn't necessary and they are willing to cancel weeks or change the tempo, I think that's them saying, you want to know what? Yeah, these offseason programs have gotten out of hand. We don't need you here all this time, and we don't need to kill you guys out in the practice field and get guys hurt. So it seems like the coaches are kind of at least aware of the issues at hand. And then if we want to talk about success, I think this was the first time in a long time players felt like they actually had a choice. And I think we created an environment that allowed guys to make a clear, honest decision of whether they should. And I think that's the real question. I know a lot of people talk about, well, what was this about? I think the question everybody has to ask themselves as players is this worth your time to volunteer to come to these practices? And that could be, early on, it was the COVID was still an issue and still is an issue. The protocols weren't in a good spot for players. They're going to be too burdensome on the players. And then it comes to, is it worth my rest, my recovery, where I like working out, being with my family? Is it worth leaving those things to come to the facility? And we had some guys who said yes and some guys who said no, but that's the decision that every player should be able to make because it's a voluntary program. So I would think it's a successful. I think this is going to continue because if I'm one of the teams that agreed to only go in for 2 weeks, I can't imagine next year if the coach said we're going to do 9 weeks that they're going to like that idea. If I was a player who didn't go in and like last year felt really good all season, felt like I had less miles on the tires, I don't see that really changing. And I think the teams that went in and didn't negotiate and didn't make changes, we've seen a handful of those teams violate the CBA. And I think those players are now realizing that unless they start getting some assurances from their clubs, they probably shouldn't go anymore. And I think this was a reminder of those teams that what OTAs are like when you don't have an agreement with your team, they're going to take care of you. So in the end, if for the next 9 years, it's going to be 32 teams doing 32 different things, but they're all better than what's in the CBA, I think that's great for players.
Hey, JC, do you think players should have a say-so in training camp practices and joint practices, or is that a line you don't wish to cross?
A say-so, what do you mean by say-so?
In a discussion, a conversation with your coaches that maybe you could lighten it up a little bit more in training camp?
But I think that's something that we as a union are working with the NFL on learning from what we did last year. Again, I think a lot of that science is pretty clear that we can continue to build and be better in training camp and ramp up the right way. I think the ramp that we had last year was very successful. And I think the joint panel of our experts agree with that the ramp, both in duration and intensity, is an important aspect. So I think we continue to build on that. But again, the injury issue gets put into a player issue only, but the teams want their players healthy, the fans want their players healthy, and obviously the players want to be healthy. So it's something that we should all be working on to make sure guys can play at a high level, both this year and into the future for as long as they feel like it and not get worn out and beat down before they should be.
Thanks.
Thanks, Tony. Jeff Shadell, you're up. Jeff, go ahead.
Do you think it took COVID, JC, to open your eyes to this new approach? And the second part of the question is, do you think you need more than 1 year of data to prove that the lighter OTAs really do affect the injury rate?
Well, I think